Do you want me to check each one manually? Okay, I hope you're not in a hurry. One of my first jobs after college was at a small financial services company. There were a lot of problems there, and most of them were because of the boss. I'll call her that because she was tall, extremely thin, with a sharp face, always wearing heels and designer clothes. She was wildly incompetent and constantly yelled at people, blaming them for her mistakes. She often went on long holidays abroad and bragged about giving expensive gifts to her 20-year-old lover. I'm not kidding, while complaining about how expensive it was to support us, even though she paid minimum wage and no one ever got a raise. She fired people for the slightest reason or because of imaginary grievances. She also singled out favorites among the employees so that a few of her minions could do whatever they wanted, while the rest of us were like serfs. Staff turnover was huge, and the atmosphere was so toxic that either losers who couldn't find another job worked there, or poor souls like me, who desperately grabbed any job they could find and quit as soon as they found something better. In fact, the only reason the company hadn't collapsed yet was that she only showed up once or twice a week, and the rest of the time we worked without her interference. She was just a caricature of a villain. It is impossible to overstate how terrible her temper was. Now I can laugh about it, but back then she terrified me when she started yelling at me from the other end of the corridor. I was young. It was my first job. And at first when she yelled, I thought I was really at fault and not good enough. In general, the work itself was boring and routine. But we had a very important task. When we received physical copies of contracts from clients, we had to scan them, upload the scans to our internal database, and then send the physical contracts to the head office for archiving. This was very important because if a contract was lost, the client could stop paying, and the company would not receive any money. The loss of one contract could mean a loss of 50, and the head office took this very seriously and could even launch an investigation. Of course, the company was very disorganized, and we constantly lost contracts. Everyone knew that contracts were being lost. Even I, a newcomer, could see that the number of contracts received and sent did not match. But no one dared to say anything about it, and she was too stupid to notice. It couldn't go on like this forever. One Thursday morning, she called me into her office and demanded that I check all the contracts in the database and find out if anything was missing. The head office had put pressure on her, suspecting discrepancies, and now she was pretending that checking was my job and I wasn't doing it. It was complete bullshit because such a check was not part of my job description. It was a big responsibility that should not have been entrusted to a new employee. And no one had ever told me that I had to do it in the 2 months I had been working there. But I still wanted to be a good employee, so I told her I would do it immediately. She took a stack of printed sheets from her desk and handed them to me. She said, "Here are the contract numbers for the last quarter. Check each one and write down the numbers of all the missing contracts." "But there are no contracts. It's impossible." "Well, you're all idiots. So maybe something is missing. Hurry up. I need it today because I'm flying to Ibiza." I looked at the stack of paper in my hands. It was about 100 pages, and each page had a long list of contract numbers, maybe several thousand contracts. I quickly calculated that it would take me 4 or 5 days to check the entire list manually, and of course, it was impossible to finish everything in one day. When I tried to point this out to Carosella, she looked at me like I was an idiot and started yelling, "You just enter the number into the computer. Then look at the information. It takes no more than 10 to 20 seconds. Stop being lazy and get to work." She thought that if it took 10 seconds to check one contract, then 10 could be checked in 10 minutes. How could I have thought that the laws of mathematics applied to a goal that always knows better? At that point, I was already fed up with her ridiculous demands, but I was still trying to do my job properly. Yes, I was young and naive. The time for evil, deliberate subjugation had not yet come. I went back to my office and tried to find a way to actually complete the task in one day. After calming down from all the shouting, I realized that it was actually very simple. She said to check the contracts one by one because that was the only way she knew how. Almost everyone in the office was new to the company, but I had access to the database in Google, and after a few trials and errors, I found an online guide and was able to query the database to immediately see a list of all the missing contracts. I didn't even have to worry about accidentally missing a line or entering the wrong number. What would have happened if I had done it manually? It took less than 2 hours. There were 22 missing contracts in total. Losing one is bad, two is worse. But 22? Yes, I won't lie. I also enjoyed proving how badly they had screwed up. I printed out the list of 22 missing contracts, didn't use email, and went to her office. At first, she gloated, saying, "I told you it wouldn't take long. You're a lazy fool." But then she saw the list, and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. She immediately started yelling that it was impossible and that I had made a mistake. I didn't flinch, because even if I didn't always believe in myself, I believed in the accuracy of the data. And I manually checked those 22 contracts, being 100% sure that they were indeed missing. She yelled, and I just shook my head and said that this was the correct data obtained as a result of my query. I'm sure she didn't even know what a request was. The only thing she understood was that I hadn't done what she had asked me to do. Instead of manually checking the list of numbers, I had obtained it through some kind of computer magic. She shouted that I hadn't been assigned to hack her database, and even hinted that my diploma was fake. No kidding. She threw a piece of paper at me and said that now my task was to do everything again, but correctly, and now it was time for malicious obedience. I returned to my office and took the original 100-page list of contracts from Chrysler. I didn't need it before because I could simply filter the records by date, but now I was forbidden to do so. You can't hack into the database. You have to do everything by the book. I very slowly entered the first number, waited for the page to load, checked the contract, checked it carefully, because this was, after all, a very important task that had been entrusted to me. This contract was in order, so I carefully ticked the box next to the first number. One down, a few thousand left at this stage. In essence, I was paid to listen to podcasts. We were allowed to wear headphones while performing the task, which had already been completed, but in a slow and inefficient manner. I had other tasks to complete, otherwise production would have stopped. But I dropped everything because she said it was my only task. By lunchtime, I had completed maybe 3 or 4 pages. By midday, she began to wonder why it was taking so long and why complaints were coming in that my usual tasks were not being completed. She came into my office and accused me of doing nothing. I showed her the list I was working on, and in front of her, deliberately entered the contract number very slowly and ticked it off. Now I could see the wheels turning in Alla's head as she slowly realized that she had set me an impossible task. She asked about my list of 22 missing contracts, and I said that, as far as I could tell, it was full of errors, so I destroyed it and deleted the files from my computer. She started yelling that she was leaving for Ibiza tonight and that I was too slow. I replied that I was trying to be very careful because she had reprimanded me for the mistakes and I wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. And then she had a brilliant idea. She said I was too slow and stupid, so she would do the work herself. Of course, her way of doing the work herself was to call each employee into her office one by one, give them a couple of pages with contract numbers, and tell them to check them and write down all the missing contracts. She refused to acknowledge that I had proven it was impossible for one person to complete the task in a day, so she decided that 30 people would do it in a day to put me in my place. She assigned me the most menial task of running around the office, collecting papers from everyone who finished and handing them to her so she could compile her list. She thought it was some kind of punishment for me, but I didn't care anymore. And I just laughed at how she had shut down the entire office at 4:00 p.m. Every time I gave someone their list, I said in a serious tone, "Don't forget to be careful and take your time. After all, Miss DeVille says it's very important not to make mistakes." It was complete nonsense. She even made the secretary do it, which meant that calls went unanswered and chaos reigned at the reception desk. I felt sorry for the 2 or 3 normal people in the office who got dragged into it, but the rest of the staff were idiots anyway. By the end of the day, she had somehow compiled her list of missing contracts. She showed it to me, triumphantly declaring that only 19 contracts were missing, not counting the fact that she was trying to present it as a victory because there were 3 fewer contracts than I said and her list was incorrect. I kept a copy of my list and later, out of pure curiosity, checked it with Alan and other employees. They correctly identified 18 missing contracts, 4 contracts, and completely missed 1 contract that was on the list. and was not actually lost. This last point was particularly absurd because it meant that no one had checked the list, otherwise they would have found this contract in the database and the error would have been immediately obvious. I didn't point this out. After all, I wasn't tasked with checking her work. At this point, a slight smirk appeared on my face because I realized that the head office would not only discover how many contracts we had lost, but also that she didn't even know how to check them. She was completely screwed, but she was too stupid to realize it. Of course, my boss noticed my smirk and started yelling at me for it. "Why are you laughing? Do you think it's funny that you wasted so much time?" No, you're absolutely right. It was entirely possible to check all the contracts manually by this evening. Thank you for showing me that. Don't think you're so smart. Do you know how many people want your job? I could replace you very easily. Really, do you have a lot of candidates for this position? A lot. And are they qualified? Yes, more qualified than you. Wow. It seems you should have hired one of them instead of me. Yes, I can call any of them, and they'll be ready to start tomorrow. Great idea. You should probably do that. I'm handing in my resignation. My last day is next Wednesday. She froze in shock. I never saw her again. She was supposed to be in Ibiza from Friday to Sunday, but I heard she extended her holiday. I don't know if she was trying to avoid meeting me or the people from the head office who were asking questions about the missing contracts. My replacement showed up on Tuesday, but I didn't talk to him. I just sat in the office for the rest of the week, watching YouTube videos. And on Wednesday I left, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was preparing for hard times, as I had quit suddenly. I didn't have another job or any chance of getting good references, but I was lucky. And by the end of the month, I found a much better job. The funny thing is, I just wanted to get my last paycheck and forget about it. But his deputy, Jasper, said I would have to come in and sign some legal documents stating that I would not sue the company, otherwise they would not give me my money. I told him that I wasn't going to sue. I just wanted to get what I was owed, but he insisted that I sign. He claimed that it was a legal requirement for my own protection, that all former employees were required to sign such documents, and that I wouldn't get my money until I signed, and so on. In the end, I agreed to come. I came and brought my lawyer with me. Jasper's face immediately turned to stone. When I politely explained that since he had been so insistent on the phone, I wanted to make sure that we signed all the necessary documents and didn't make any mistakes. The lawyer glanced at the nonsense they wanted me to sign, quoted a few laws, and said something like, "My client's contract is very clear, and he is not obliged to sign anything. If he does not receive his salary by such and such a date, we will sue you for breach of contract." Yes, unlike some people, I did not lose my contract. The next day, I received my money. I never went back there again. Later, I heard that the company went bankrupt. Crowley had to ask his relatives for help so he wouldn't end up on the street. Comment: I'm surprised you didn't send your exact list of missing contracts to your superiors immediately after she left. Author: To be honest, I wasn't even tempted to do so. As soon as the parent company started an investigation, they would have quickly found the list of missing contracts themselves. Besides, I wasn't going to continue working in this field, and just wanted to put this confusing story behind me as soon as possible.